everybody gets so defensive. Like my guys on my staff, jokingly would talk a little smack just because they all get worked up. And I've always kind of used it as but in reality, for real, like if you got I know there's people out there that got a problem with Westside Barbell, guarantee they use a reverse hyper.
100%. Oh, 110%. 110%. I mean, that or any type of belt squat variation, even if they don't get it from Westside, they get it from Elite or Arsenal or Rogue. Like, they're all patent workarounds. They are.
No doubt. Well, anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to derail us, but I had to acknowledge that before we move on.
No, I appreciate that. So for Coach Feld, for those that don't know who you are, who is Coach Feld? Who is Aaron Feld? Who is the mustache wonder of the South?
I mean, maybe the world's most recognizable PE teacher. I don't know.
You and Kenny Powers are competing right
what's
now.
that?
You and Kenny Powers are competing right now.
Dude, Kenny Powers ain't got shit on me, man. La Flama Blanca, man. He can't touch this mustache.
That's right. That's right.
Hey, listen, he didn't even try to learn Spanish. I'm learning Spanish, okay?
You have to down there.
Yeah.
You got to know your Espanol.
I'm committed, dude. I'm committed.
Yeah. So, where'd you start? And then how did that escalate from job to job to job until you got to Oregon? Can you give everyone that story? Because I think a lot of people don't understand when you get into this field, if they're deciding to get into this field, or even if they've just begun, it's a lot. There are a lot of stepping stones involved.
Yeah.
So just give us from the start.
Is this going to be all audio, or are you going to see my crappy office?
Oh, we're going to see your crappy office.
Oh man. Yeah, dude. I was supposed to get new furniture. I just hung my jersey, so that's cool. But I was supposed to get new furniture at some point, but I never unpacked because anyway. All right. Okay, so I did what every good Southern white Christian does right after college and got married immediately after college, like an idiot.
Yes.
And married a young woman who wasn't ready to be in that kind of relationship, and our marriage fell apart quickly. I got cut from the NFL. I played football for 17 years. I played football in the NFL for 7 whole days. Hold your applause. And when I got cut, I got an undergrad degree in business with emphasis in construction and land development. And I poured concrete for about a year while I was training for the NFL, about 8 months while I was training for the NFL. When I got cut, I was like, I'm never pouring concrete. Look, you think you do man's work in a weight room, go rake concrete for a couple months. Mm-hmm. Said, I'm never doing that again. But what am I going to do? I was like, I got a business degree. I'm going to go try to use my business degree. But I love the fitness industry, whatever. So I was like, I got in with Gold's Gym. There's a Gold's Gym in my hometown. I promise this is relevant to what you asked me.
Okay.
So I got into this Gold's Gym. And I really poured myself into work. I lost football. I've been training for football for 17 years. The only job interview I'd ever been on was a football interview, and then all of a sudden it was gone, and I needed support at home, and I didn't really get it. And so I just poured myself into work. I neglected my marriage. And things went, I don't want to get into all that just out of, not trying to throw stones here, but things went the wrong way. My marriage ended. And I found myself sleeping on my parents' bed, guest bed, depressed, and just didn't have any idea what I was going to do with my life. And I said, you know what do I want to do? What have I always wanted to do? I was like, I want to be a college strength coach. My strength coach in college was phenomenal. And I said, so I said, you know what, that's what I'm going to go do. So I walked in, I was at UAB. I went down to UAB in Birmingham, Alabama. Everybody knows UAB is the program that shut down. And
right.
And I was there right before that happened, but they had just had a coaching turnover. And I literally walked in the weight room on a Saturday. There were guys in there doing extra work. And I walked up to a guy named Dwayne Chandler. I think he's an assistant at Virginia now. But I walked up to Dwayne Chandler, stuck my hand and said, hey, I'm Aaron Feld. I know you're looking for an assistant. Like, I'm your guy. Let's get this done. How do we get this done? And he was like what? It's like, who is this guy? So we sat down, we talked shop for like an hour, and then we kept in touch. And then, about 6 weeks later, I started. He couldn't hire me as a full-time strength coach because I had no coaching experience. So he brought me on as basically a GA, but I was what's called an 04 regular B, thanks, UAB hospital system. And I was basically like a casual worker. They paid me like a GA, but I didn't go to class. And I did that for about 20 months. I made about $900 in my bank account a month, for about 20 months. which I don't, if you do some basic math, is not very much. So I did that, and then I could see the writing on the walls. New like stuff was going wrong at that place, and so I was like, I got to get out of here. So I went and interned at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa, or my wife graduated from there, so I call it UAT to make her mad. So I went there. I interned there for about 10 months for Scott Cochran and that whole crew. And then I got my first full-time job at UNA North Alabama, which is in Florence, Alabama. They're a D2 school. And I went there, and now we're getting somewhere. So that took so long. So Bobby Johnson was the head football coach, who had won 3 national championships back to back in the 90s. Actually, he won national championships in D2 college football while Michael Jordan was winning back to back national or world titles in basketball. So yeah, I think I know the years are all. Anyway, 94, 95, 96, or 93, 94, 95, it doesn't matter. But anyway, so I went to work for him because he wins championships. Like, I want to be around successful people. So I'm like, I'm going to go to this D2 school, and I'm going to be a part of championship program. And I was there for like 3 months. And as the head strength coach for all sports with 430 something athletes. And then a guy that was at Alabama had gotten the head job at Georgia. The guy that I interned for that whole staff, and said, hey, I want you to come work for me at Georgia. I was like, well, let me talk to my AD. I told my AD, I was like, hey man, I got this opportunity at Georgia. I've got to consider it. Like, and look, I was like thinking like, hey, maybe give me a raise. I'll stick around. He's like, all right, well, good luck at Georgia. And I was like, I called my wife now, who was my girlfriend at the time. I was like, wow, I guess I'm going to Georgia. And I was actually getting ready to propose to her. I'd gotten her a job as the in-house legal counsel for the University of North Alabama. For those attorneys who are listening, that's a job that attorneys work for 20 years trying to get.
Okay.
And she was fresh out of law school, and they had never had in-house counsel. And anyway, I convinced her to move to Georgia with me. I was at Georgia for 3 years, and then I got hired at Oregon. And I told that whole long, lengthy story to say this. My path was unique. It was rare. And it was still one of the hardest things I've ever done. There's people in this business trying to get in this business, and you have to understand your biggest job is to outlast all the other people who are going to quit before they make it to their opportunity. And you just got to cross your finger and hope the ones that are willing to stick to it till they make it are the ones who are actually good at the job for the right reasons.
Yeah. So is that at that point, that was the Oregon?
Yes.
Okay. So when you got to Oregon, how different was that than Northern Alabama?
So the weight room I had at North Alabama was brand new.
Okay.
They had just built it. It was $1 million, 5,000 square foot facility.
That's delicious.
Yeah.
That's delicious. Yeah. That's so great.
I mean, it's a hell of a garage gym. Let's put it that way.
Right.
I mean, it actually for where it was in the detail, like, it was actually a really good space, considering the limitations of Division II opportunities and stuff like that at the time. But then I go to a place that's got, arguably some of the top facilities in the country. And I quickly learned that top facilities in the country don't mean jack. It's actually, I just gave a recruiting presentation here, and I always said it in my recruiting presentation there. It's not about the room. It's about the men and women in the room. But you want to talk about the difference between going from that to Georgia, and honestly, the weight room in Georgia when I was there was no bueno. Look, I'm already learning Spanish. But yeah, I learned quickly that it doesn't matter what kind of equipment. Space is more important than the way it looks.
Okay. Who was the coach you worked with and for at Georgia?
So I had Mark. I was there for Mark Ricks last year, and then I worked with Kirby Smart the first 2 years. Scott Sinclair came from UCF with Ed Ellis. Ed Ellis is one of my favorite human beings on the planet. If you don't know him, you really should. He was the head strength coach at UCF for years and years and years.
Okay.
Awesome human being. And Scott Sinclair wouldn't be here without him. He gave me the opportunity he kept me on as a holdover, which anybody who's been in this business is always hit or miss. Interpersonal relationship stuff are really hard that way. But anyway, so Scott Sinclair kept me on really treated me well and gave me an opportunity to continue to learn and grow. And then helped me, when it was he was happy for me when I got the opportunity to go be a head strength coach. It wasn't one of the situations where, sometimes it's not as smooth as that. So, but anyway, Ed Ellis and Scott Sinclair come to Georgia with Kirby, and then they kept me on. And then, that was my experience at Georgia.
Okay. So philosophy wise, into nuts and bolts, this is stuff that we just love. When you started your strength coach journey, your first gig, what was your, if you were in charge at UAB, what would have been your philosophy? And then when you went to Northern, how did it transfer? When you start going all these places after you accrued knowledge, how does it change? Go from location to location. And what was the biggest thing you're like, this is what I'm going to take away from this institution, from these coaches. I'm going to apply it from here on out.
What's funny is after the first question you asked me, I was like, he's not going to ask me any more in-depth questions because I'm going to. Okay. All right. So, all right.
Oh, no.
You just asked all right. So this is one of my favorite questions because, dude, if I'd been in charge of UAB, like we would have gotten everybody hurt and I wouldn't have a job anymore. So, okay, this isn't really, all right. I've told this story before. So, all right, here's buckle up. All right. So I was that 4-day split guy. You got to do upper, lower. You got to have a dynamic day and a max effort day. And if you don't do that, then you're wrong. Like, that was my philosophy. And you got to run every day. I mean, they got to be coming back for extra work on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You got to get extra work after the extra work on. We need, as a matter of fact, we need an 8-day week so we can have a whole extra day of extra work. That was kind of my philosophy. More is better. You're soft. Stop being a punk. Like work harder. And you can't outlift me. Yeah, because I was 24 and I was barely out of college and I was strong as shit because I didn't have any regard for my personal safety. And that was what drove my coaching philosophy. And so I had the opportunity to lead. So my philosophy then would have been very I can't say this even to you. It's like more of like a Westside, like move heavy shit all the time kind of,
stronger.
Yeah. And so like I've actually so far removed from what like a true Westside program looks like and what a true conjugate looks like and what a true triphasic looks like and what like I've forgotten all that because like you learn the bits and pieces and you meld them together. So I honestly don't even remember what that would have looked like, but it was 4 days a week with your off day was Wednesday. And then you literally, it was a bloodbath Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And then they had mandatory conditioning on Saturday.
Yeah.
Go find the biggest hill we can and make people quit and puke and bring the trash can. It's like, coach, I'm dizzy. Shut up.
Yep.
Yeah. That ain't it. And so I go to Alabama after that, and they're training on a 3-day split. And I'm like, this is stupid. How are you supposed to get guys stronger? Like, remember, I'm in Alabama, right? This is dumb. What do you guys do? Like, what do y'all do? Like, I didn't say any of this, but I'm like, this is crazy. They're only lifting 3 days a week. What I learned in that process was when you have elite level athletes, the recovery is almost more important than the training stimulus itself. Okay. And so less is more. It's not least effective dose. It's optimal effective dose. More is not always better. And, diminishing marginal utility has become like the name of the game. And, I'm a business undergrad. So like the definition, like I learned what diminishing marginal utility was. I raised my hand in that class, came up to the stage, and she gave me a Snickers bar and I ate it. She's like, tell me, how good is that Snickers? Like, this is freaking awesome. I'm starving. I always come to this class. I'm hungry. She's like, here, have another one. I'm like, great. She's like, here, have another one. Great. And she's like, here, have another one. I'm like, she's like, no, eat it. I'm like, she's like, no, you volunteered, eat the Snickers. I'm like, she's like, eat the Snickers. I'm like, all right, I ate the Snickers. And I thought that was it. And she's like, okay, here's another one. I was like, dude, I've eaten like 5 Snickers and it's only been like 6 minutes. And like, my stomach kind of hurts. Where she's like, eat another one. And I'm like, no. She's like, no, you're going to eat another one. I'm like, I'm not eating another one. She's like, oh, so you don't like Snickers? You don't want Snickers? You told me that Snickers were great. Because she had a bunch of candy bars. She asked me to pick. I picked Snickers. So you pick Snickers? Eat the Snickers. I was like, I don't want it. And she was like, exactly. But the first 2 were the greatest thing you'd ever had. And more is better, right? I'm like, no, I don't want any more Snickers. And I don't think I've eaten one since, honestly. So that was like 10 years ago or more. How old am I? 35. Yeah, it was like 12 years ago. So it really like struck me when I got to Alabama and I'm watching them train and without calling it diminishing marginal utility, Chadwick, come back. We're in the middle of stuff. You can't leave.
He's got 2 infant children and a naked 3-year-old running Graham shot through the house. I got nothing for you.
Okay. Basically, they were describing diminishing marginal utility as I know it, as an actual like definition that I learned. And so I put that in the back of my head, like, don't make kids hate stuff they love, because you do it so often and so much and so hard. Now, there's also the part where like you have to explain to them the monotony of growth, and like speed work is boring, strength work can be boring, but it has to be the proper dose and prescribed dose. You might hate it because you don't like to work hard, but you're not going to hate it because we overdid it.
Right.
So I learned that while I was there, and then I also learned I don't want to talk trash here, but like
no.
Way too much volume on certain types of conditioning and running, and they masked it with just elite level athletes, and it got better. And Scott Cochran did a great job over the years of like trying to grow and change that program. But it's the age old battle of like sport coach versus strength coach. And so I learned from a young age in this business that you have to be willing to fight battles with your head coach. And that's why I love working with Coach Cristobal here is we battle, bro. Like we go at it in a very respectful, elite professional way. But I'm talking like we throw down, and a lot of things have changed and some things haven't. And every now and again, he invokes you got to trust me. I've been doing this for 27 years or whatever. And I'm like, bet, because I do trust him. And he's he's never been wrong on one of those. I mean, I might've been righter once or twice, but he wasn't wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like, so he never invoked that and been like, you have to trust me. And then like everything fell apart. And so like when he ever, like if he believes something that strongly, I'm always going to have his back on that. But like I told him when I went on my interview out to Oregon, I told my wife, I said, hey, are you interested in moving out to Oregon? She's like, well, you haven't gone on your interview. I was like, she's like, just go and see how it goes. I was like, you don't understand. If I go on this interview, I'm getting this job. Like if I fly to 2,500 miles, I'm coming back with a job offer. So you need to decide if the answer is absolutely no, just tell me now and I won't waste their time. And she's like, no, I'm willing to. I said, if it's like, maybe but if it's definitely no, let's not waste anybody's time. And so when I was on the interview with him, I told him straight up, I was like, hey, look, if you're looking for a yes man that's just going to come in, say yes, sir, and do whatever you say just because you say it, like, I'm not the guy. Like at the end of the day, you're the boss, and whatever you want, like that's what you're going to get. But if we're doing something I don't think is safe or healthy or is wrong, I'm going to fight tooth and nail right up until the last minute. And like when the whistle blows, like whatever we've settled on, that's what it's going to be. But like that's my responsibility to you, is to push you to learn and grow as well, but also to put my foot down when things are unsafe or wrong. And so, we walked into a program that had a major medical issue the year before we got there. And so that, they tried to roll me underneath. I'm digressing, but it's a great story.
No, I remember this scenario. I remember
they tried to roll me underneath the sports science department there. And like, I was like, nah, like, that's not it. Like, you can't hamstring me by making me do what some guy, like I'm the guy was Scottish that ran a sports science department. He was terrible. And like, I was like, I'm the only person here that's an expert at training 120 American football players. I threw that American football players. American football players at one time. Like you had a problem before I got here. I'm the solution that you settled on to fix it. Right. Like, let me do what I need to do. And they did it. Coach Cristobal had my back but we got it fixed. And so we fixed all those issues. But like, that's the thing. Like if something happening that is wrong, like coaches talk about all the time about job security. Like, well, I don't want to piss my head coach off. I don't want my job. Well, I would rather lose my job than knowingly, willingly participate in something that I know is unsafe or unhealthy or wrong. But you know what? You stand on your morals and values and lose your job, you'll get another one.
Yes. You
lose your job because people get hurt because you didn't speak up, you're not going to get another one.
Right.
And so like I tell people all the time, I'd rather lose my job than compromise my morals and values. And like, I literally mean that. Now, thankfully I have a head coach that would never put me in that position. I didn't know that at the beginning of things, but I know that now, but like I meant it when I said it. And so, but that goes back again to what I learned while I was at Alabama was, you don't have to beat these dudes into the ground. You don't have to make things unsafe or unhealthy. You have to push these guys to their limits, but not past them. Like you want to bump their limits up one notch every time. And not push them overboard because you want to spend your time in overreaching syndrome, but you never want to get into overtraining. Like you need to be fully recovered when you get to spring ball, not necessarily spring ball, like especially if you have spring break in the middle like we do, but like at some point you got to get back to max capacity before you finish. So these guys, like, recovery is so important. Neurological freshness is so important. And I learned that at Alabama. And then I went to UNA, and I didn't do anything different. Like, that changed my programming philosophy, which I took to UNA. But what I learned at UNA is probably the most valuable thing I learned. Well, I didn't learn it at UNA. I learned it after I left. But if I had been able to hire, now I was the only strength coach at UNA. I had 430 something athletes, 13 sports by myself. I spent like 9 hours a day training athletes on the floor. And that's not even like writing workouts or cleaning or whatever, by myself. And I was messed up in the head. Like, I couldn't do the whole, like, okay, here's your workout, go do it. I'm gonna be in the office, like typing other programs. Like, I trained volleyball like I trained football. Like, and I don't mean the same workouts. I just mean with the same intensity and the same focus. Like, I didn't know how to not do that.
Right.
And so that was a partial lesson I learned after the fact. But the next one is, if I could have hired a whole staff, there would have been 5 me's running around, and it would have been a disaster. Like, it would have been absolutely terrible, and people would have hated us, and we probably would have like burned the building down and gotten fired and whatever. But I learned when I went to Georgia with Mark Hockey, who hired me, who went from Alabama to Georgia, hired me. We had a really well-rounded staff. But our staff didn't really get along. It was like me and Hockey versus the other 3 guys, and they're all great strength coaches, but it was just like, we're coming into a program that had been there established for years. Our strength coach retired. They brought a guy in over the top of the guys that were already there. It was just a little bit of bad blood, mostly professional, but you could tell there was friction. And I thought Hockey handled it really, really well. It was a really challenging situation for a first-time head strength coach. So from the time of building UNA had never, I know I'm jumping around. I have ADHD. Give me a break. Okay. So UNA had never had a strength coach before. They never had a weight room really before. And so, like, I get in there, I'm like, okay, so like, what's my budget there? What do you mean? I'm like, well, like, okay, you got to put toilet paper in the bathroom. Who pays for that? Right. You gotta clean the floors. Like, who buys the cleaning material? Does that come out of my budget? Is there a cleaning budget? Like, do I need to actually clean the bathroom myself? Or do we have a custodian? Like, what does that look like? What's our emergency action plan? Where's the AED? Like, where are all these things? Cause I'm fresh off, I've got the book. I'm like, hey, administrative.
Oh, the NSCA book, looking at all.
We need to have this gap between the racks.
You need the AED. Where's the AED? And all these things. And part of, like I said, I'm a business undergrad. So I'm thinking from a business standpoint, liability, like, do we have liability waivers for coaches that don't work for the university? Because D2 schools, sometimes they contract out their golf coach and all this, like, he's in here, something falls on him. Like, are we covered? Like, all those things. So I learned a lot that really helped me later on from that. And then carrying that with me to Coach Hockey. It was his first time being a head strength coach. So I helped him with some of those things, helped him with a little bit of programming. He taught me a lot about motivation and mindset and, a lot of those things. But the most important thing he taught me was having a well-rounded staff is the most important thing. And that experience of having a staff that wasn't exactly meshing together really well also taught me that that's also extremely important. So when I went out to Oregon, I took Matt File, who's the head strength coach at UNLV right now. I took Matt File with me. He was an intern who we bumped up to a full-time paid position on a temporary contract to fill a hole until we could get a full-time guy in there. I took him with me, and I hired Shawn Williams away from Wisconsin. 2 guys that I knew were great human beings. I didn't know if Shawn Williams could coach his way out of a paper bag. I didn't. Now, he's a phenomenal coach, and he's even better now than he was then, because he was really new to the business. But like, coaching acumen and like instincts on how to coach players, phenomenal. But I didn't know that. I just knew he was a great human being. And just conversations that we had and the people I met him with. And so I was like, I'm taking 2 great human beings out there with me. Coach File is about as close to me as you can get without being me. And so I knew I could turn my back on the room if I needed to, and shit would happen exactly the way I wanted it to. So I get out there, and I mean, it's just me and File back to back in a bar fight, right? And I'm not really utilizing Shaw to his best capabilities, because I knew File could do it. And instead of I poured everything on File, and then File ended up leaving the next year to go work with RD at Maryland.
Okay.
And so I had no right hand at that point because I had never given Shaw the opportunity to even show what he was capable of. So I called him off. It's like, bro, it's go time. Like, you got to step up. And he absolutely did. And he crushed it for me for the next 3 years as my assistant director. And, but I learned the lesson that you have to trust your people and you have to give them opportunities to learn and grow and make mistakes. I learned that the hard way because it was a learning curve to get him caught up, and it shouldn't have been. Mm-hmm. Right. And notice we haven't talked about sets and reps this whole time.
Not yet.
You're talking about philosophy, and my philosophy is about surrounding your players with the most elite level human beings possible. Right. So we ended up hiring a great staff. So the last 4 years, I've put out 3 head strength coaches, and everybody who's listening to this, don't roll your eyes. I'm not promoting myself. I hired people who are ready to be head strength coaches. I haven't just taken dudes off the street and taught them to be mini me and like trying to get dudes hired at places to say how many guys are out there. But that's what I learned was bring in people who are ready for the next step. Right. So at one point I had Matt File on my staff, who's now a head strength coach. And then I replaced him. I didn't replace him. Actually, I had created a new position. I replaced him with Shaw, but I hired Jeff Eaton away from Purdue. And then I ended up getting Reed Kagi from Iowa State. Now, Reed Kagi's a head strength coach. Matt File's a head strength coach. And then RD, we kind of had an argument. We had it out about this, but RD hired File away from me, which we dealt with that emotionally. But then I hired Mason Baggett away from him. And we haven't RD, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry. We haven't had a chance to joke about this yet. I'm like, dude, that's totally your fault. I never would have even met the guy if you hadn't hired File. So like, but Mason Baggett is a freaking phenomenal human being, and he's an excellent strength coach. He's now the head strength coach at Nevada. Coach Eaton's has interviewed for multiple head strength coach jobs. It's only a matter of time before he's gone. But the point is, like, I'm bringing in dudes who are ready for the next step. And my encouragement to all the strength coaches who are listening to this, don't be intimidated to hire coaches who are better than you. Every coach that I've ever hired is a better strength coach than me, period. Every single one of them. And here's the cool part. I give them all the credit in the media, and I get credit for that too. Everything that they do, I get credit for because I hired them. Right? Yeah, the program is mine. I put it in on paper, and then we come in the office and they poke holes in it. Coach Eaton would tell you he's an everything guy, but he's big on the west side of the spectrum. I've got Coach Vic Ishmael here. He's a sprint certified coach. He's a big guy, but everything we talk about speed and power. And so like I put the program on paper, and then we argue about it for 5 hours a day for a couple of days in a row until we land on what we're going to do. Because I tell my staff, if you go out on the floor and you're pissed off about the way we're training, that is your fault. You're going to have every opportunity to fight for what you believe in and change what we're doing. But you better be more knowledgeable and more passionate about what you want to do than I am about what I want to do. Because you're going to have to change my mind. Change my mind. We'll do anything you want to do. You got to change my mind. And so that's my philosophy. That's what changed from UNA in Georgia. I don't have a philosophy anymore. It's what's the best thing that this team needs right now. And so like, yeah. I'm not an Olympic guy. I'm not a conjugate guy. I'm not a Westside guy. I'm not a CrossFit guy. I mean, dude, there's times we do metabolic conditioning that looks just like a WOD. I hate that word. WOD.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So do I.
But we do stuff that like people think, oh, what's the WOD today? I'm like, I would just like claw my eyes out and be like, dude, it's metabolic conditioning. These guys got to get in better shape. So like, it just depends on what phase you're in, what the team needs. And again, a convoluted long answer to a simple question, but like, that's my philosophy is assess the needs of your team right now. And do what they need. Now, amongst all of that, if you asked me to describe the way we train with 7 fundamentals. Okay. I'm going to go real fast. You guys can record this and play it back, whatever. Number 1 is neck. Neck is the most important part of your body to train for football. Argue with me if you want to, you're wrong. If you say it's not. Okay. Number 2, core mobility and stability. We do a loaded overhead squat as a test for where we have mobility issues. An overhead squat with 95 pounds on the bar will tell you if you have ankle issue, knee issue, hip issue, lumbar spine, thoracic spine, cervical spine, shoulder, elbow, wrist. Every joint system in the body is going to be taxed from a mobility perspective on an overhead squat. Find the weaknesses, fix them. That's number 2. Number 3 is loaded hinge, triple extension. Mostly a power clean, but it can be any kind of triple extension, any kind of hinge. Your power clean, we catch them deep to take the hip flexors out of the pelvic stability component. So your anterior core has to do the job of stabilizing the pelvic and the lumbar spine, which is also just like impact on a football field. But the other part of it is top speed mechanics. When you pull a bar off the ground and it reaches that knee and your legs are almost perfectly straight, but not quite, they're straight, but not locked out, your hamstring and glute are firing in the same sequence as when you're running at top end speed. Isometric hamstring contraction, concentric glute contraction. You can't run with both feet at the same time. It'd be like a sack race, right? But that's the same. If you could run 2 legs at the same time, it's the exact same firing sequence as when you're sprinting at top speed. So that's loaded hinge, triple extension. Number 4 is squat. Okay, we squat deep and we squat heavy. Do I care that guys go to parallel? No. Why? Because you don't play football in a parallel squat. Now we are going to front squat. We catch our cleans deep. We do kettlebell goblet squat. We're going to squat deep at certain times in certain ways. But with a back squat, a barbell on our back, I could give a shit less whether a guy squats to full depth. I'm sorry. Can you say shit on the radio? My bad.
Why not?
We've said much worse on here.
It's 2022. Yeah, we'll let it happen.
Favor, just put a bleep there.
I don't know how to bleep. I haven't got to that level of yet.
Now we have a reason. We need to bleep.
Yeah, bleep. Come on, man, help me out. Like kids are going to listen to this. Okay, so I'm sorry. It'll be fun. People will enjoy it. I bleep myself all the time when I make videos. Okay. So number 4, squat. Now, the first 3 movements, neck, loaded hinge, triple extension, and core mobility and stability, they're football specific. You can draw a straight line from that training, that specific training modality. Excuse me, you can't breathe, Crystal Light. You could draw a straight line from that to the football field to a football specific movement. Now, once you get past that football specificity, the furthest we go is once removed. A back squat, not football specific. If you do that movement on a football field, you're getting put on your backside. That's not a good thing. But training our groin, our pelvic stability, our core stability, all that stuff, it's all the things that you need to run, jump, sprint, tackle, all that stuff. Okay. All right. But that's strength. Now, all you triphasic people out here, don't get mad at me. I've completely ruined triphasic training for everybody who loves it. Okay. Triphasic training to me is strength, rate of force development, and practical application. Okay. We use the triphasic band assisted jumps to work on rate of force development. So strength is how much force can you produce? Rate of force development is how fast can you produce that force? And then once you can create a bunch of force really, really fast, how do you practically apply that to your sport? Well, for us, it's box jumps, it's bounding, it's running, it's whatever, striking a sled. All right. Pretty easy to figure out how lower body stuff turns into football specific stuff. So number 4 is squat. Number 5 is eccentric hamstring strength. 90% of the athletes we get out of high school have weak hip flexors, weak groin, and weak eccentric hamstring strength, or weak hamstring strength in general. We just talked about the firing sequence between the glute and the hamstring. All right. Your glute is stronger than your hamstring, period. Statement of fact. Your glute is not stronger concentrically than your hamstring can be isometrically or eccentrically. So when you sprint, all the force that you create with your glute has to transfer through your hamstring into your foot, or I say the heel because you're pulling back. All right. Your hamstring makes your leg a solid rod from your hip socket to your heel, right? It's a straight line and it makes it solid. It's like trying to row a canoe with an oar that's got a joint in the middle that's loose. You can't you can't do anything with it, right? That hamstring turns that oar into one rigid thing so that you can row the canoe. Y'all with me? Is that a good analogy, people?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna make that oar for you so you can use it in a demonstration.
That would be awesome. But you gotta row from above the joint. So it's like, okay. And so people think that you run with your hamstrings, why you pull your hamstrings. Well, the truth is you sprint forward with your glutes, and your hamstrings have to transfer that force into the ground. So your hamstrings have to be able to produce more force isometrically at that angle than your glutes can produce concentrically. Google isometric, eccentric, and concentric force production if you're having a hard time understanding this conversation, because we don't have time to talk about that right now. Okay. So that's what we're doing. So as soon as your hamstrings fatigue to the point where they can no longer outmatch your concentric glute contraction, you pull a hamstring. Okay. Strong hamstrings don't pull. Flexible hamstrings don't tear. But if you have strong enough hamstrings that never pull, your hamstring's going to pull before it tears. So my hamstrings never pull, they never tear. Are we all on the same page? Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's an exception to this rule somewhere. So y'all can find the one PubMed article that disproves me and tweet about it, and we'll laugh about it behind your back. All right. So That's the number 5 is eccentric hamstring strength. Number 6 is press. Okay, which bench press, any press, but we use bench press as an example. If you go on the football field and strike somebody like a bench press, your position coach is going to like do the Macho Man Randy Savage razor's edge to you and like completely destroy your soul. Like that's not a thing. Okay, so why do we bench press? Well, because it's a general strengthening exercise for all of the muscles you need to strike with your upper body, right? So we strengthen those muscles, then we do rate of force development. We do it's similar to a triphasic jump where you hook the bands on your arms and you use it to jump. Well, now we hook the band underneath our sternum on the triphasic bars at the top of the rack, and we do explosive push-ups, right? It's like a plyometric push-up at less than body weight so that you can move faster. Okay. Then practical applications, usually some kind of punch pad. My man Schlegel with his difference pads. I'm gonna throw a promo out for Schlegel. Punch pads, or you can throw a punch pad on the wall, anything that's going to be striking and have that impact, right? So that we can practically apply force into our opponent. Okay. And that's where you get football specific. You have defensive linemen strike and peak. You got the cornerbacks jamming. Got offensive linemen. We usually use a med ball because offensive linemen have double unders, elbows tight. If you strike a pad like that, you're going to break your wrist. We try to make it match what their indie looks like when they're striking. Okay. So that's number 6. We said 7 fundamentals. So the 7th one will be pull, okay, which would be pull-ups, rows, any kind of, bigger back makes a bigger press, it all goes together. But we do pull-ups as our primary example, hanging all the way through your armpits so that you're stretching the pec, the shoulder, the biceps tendon and the bicep under load, because at some point you're going to have to go make a tackle or strike somebody. You're going to get pulled, wide receiver, go up for a ball, get yanked back. You got to strain through that full range of motion. We do pause pull-ups at the bottom and the top. We do weighted pull-ups with a pause at the bottom and the top, all these things to stretch that tissue at its longest point. And then once guys can handle the load and the strain on their shoulders with it all the way straight out, then we go into working on muscle ups. I've only had one team where we even started to do that. It's taken me several years to get at any program to get guys strong enough, because we don't do we don't do CrossFit and gymnastics and stuff. So, but just getting them where they can handle that kind of force through their shoulders and armpits so that they can work on doing an explosive pull-up. But we do explosive TRX rows where we explode up, we catch in the top position where we get that ballistic, eccentric impact on the posterior shoulder for all the guys that, specifically the quarterbacks, but all the positions that need to work on if you're working on explosive pulls, presses, you got to be working on explosive pulls. So those are our 7 fundamentals. And that's what's changed from the beginning of my career to now, is instead of doing workouts, we have a philosophy, just like a practice has warm up and indie and half line pass and goal line and 7-on-7 run, 5-on-4 pass rush, low red zone, high red. They have all these pieces and they all go together in every single practice. And we did the same thing in the weight room. These are the fundamentals that we know make better football players. The one that we don't actually add into the fundamentals would be groin. I don't load the groin the same way, which is why it's not one of the fundamentals. We use it as a prep for all of our squatting, all of our sprinting, all this stuff. We're always doing isometric groin prep. I found a few ways to do concentric groin movement. If anybody has a great concentric groin exercise that's not the thing you see at Planet Fitness, I'm always looking for a good concentric groin movement to where we can actually build some mass for guys that are super underdeveloped. But mostly your groin is going to be an isometric and an eccentric mover when you're training and sprinting and playing. So, but some guys, there's just not very many isometric movements that work really well. So y'all,
I'll send you a video. I got one for you.
Bet. At Coach Feld on Twitter, just y'all send me stuff.
Okay.
So there was a lot in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of directions we go.
That was the abridged version.
That was the abridged version.
Holy crap.
So they say I talk too much. You know the difference between me and everybody that talks too much is I know and I don't care.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I always I talk very fast sometimes. I just tell people don't listen so slow.
Hey, I love it.
Works for me. I don't know.
It's a coaching thing when you're trying to dump, because that's a real thing. You're trying to be efficient. This is one of the things I think people miss that haven't been in a real, especially smaller schools where you're on time limits. When you go back to your scenario where you got 13, you're the single coach with all the sports. Efficiency is such a big deal in that setting, especially because you don't have these huge windows either where you can we're gonna learn for these 2 weeks. Like we have to be getting better these 2 weeks. Right. So you got to dump a bucket of information and you got to dump it fast and give them the, hit the sweet spot so that we can actually be effective right now. But I think that is a coaching thing, especially if you come from a certain lineage where you were forced to like, we got to go right now. Like you just learn to dump a lot of information quickly.
Well, the problem too is most of these athletes learn by doing.
Yes.
So, and we're not going to learn for these 2 weeks. All right, we're going to learn for these 2 minutes, and then you're going to go do. And what a lot of times what you can do is you can teach something for the first time, and 60% of your guys will just do it right.
Yeah.
Or right enough to where you can work on it. But then the other guys, you got to go hit them individually real fast. And then by week 2, most people are doing it right. Now you work on proficiency. So I mean, you're 100% right. And I'm going to be really rude and check my phone. My phone's blowing up. Just make sure there's not an emergency.
No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm judging a talent show on Monday, and that's okay. All right, cool. But, there's certain people in your organization, when they text you, you're like, oh crap.
Yeah.
That was one of those. So,
good.
Fair enough.
But it wasn't no crap. It was a good thing.
Okay. Okay. So at that point, you have those 7 fundamentals, and that's what you've really arrived at after your journey thus far.
Yeah. And so it doesn't matter. Like squat could be anything. Like squat could be a squat, a back squat, front squat could be a step up, a reverse lunge. I mean, we can make up words like people say like Zercher squats, if that's a thing. And then you got like, I always call things, I'm just kidding. That's a joke. I'm calling things, anything I don't know what to call it, I just call it something Garhammer. I think Garhammer is an actual thing. Never actually seen what it actually is. But me and some of my friends that I worked with back in the day when I was at UAB, we just call everything Garhammers and we don't know what it's called.
Okay.
That's what we do. And he's like, how much are you using? A grip of it. A grip? What's
What if we in England?
Every time we're referring to something, a measurement that you don't know, how much you use? I don't know. I used a grip.
I love that.
Like questioning everything.
I love that.
And then you don't tell them. Don't say a word. I used a grip of it.
So your squat piece could be any leg drive piece, unilateral, bilateral.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. Okay.
We do. So our fundamental movements that we're always going to do, we're going to do our power clean progression, which is, starts with clean pulls and works up, right? Our back squat progression, our bench press progression, our split jerk progression. Like those are like the 4 things that we're never going to not do those unless like it's in season or there's a reason not to do it. So one of those days is going to have one of those movements somewhere. But then the other 2 days that movement's not specifically on, it's going to be another variation of said principle. Fundamental.
Okay. So when you are going from school to school in that scenario, especially when you're the head, how are you developing buy-in from players and administrators to you, to your program, to your staff? What are the main ways you see that? Because in a tactical setting, that was a big thing with us when I was at Fort Knox and when Dustin was at JBLM. It was, we're coming on, and this is not something that U.S. military is used to. So that we're not a staff sergeant, not a sergeant first class. So you have to develop this rapport and buy-in. So when you're going from location to location, school to school, especially as a head, how are you developing that relationship, those buy-in with players, coaches, and ADs?
Yeah. Well, I will say this, and if Dan Radakovic is listening to this, he'll know what I'm talking about. I'm not really looking. I'm looking for buy-in from them because they brought me here. Like that should just be automatic. And like I said, Dan Radakovic is awesome. Like he gets it. And the answer is not always yes, but it's never just, nope, get out of my office. It's like, how do we, if we can't do this, what can we do to get something or get closer to or whatever. So that's been awesome here. But I'm not worried about the administration personally. Like that's not really my concern. My concern is the players, and the players drive everything. So how do you get player buy-in? Care about them is the easiest answer. Care about them is the easiest answer. And what I mean by that is like, I told these guys from the jump, I can't tell you I love you. I don't know you. Like, I'm not going to come in here and be like, oh, I love you guys. Like, that's weird. Like, don't do that.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this, don't do that. Athletes are like wild animals, dude. Like they smell lies and they smell disingenuous bullcrap. Like they know. And now they could be full of crap too. And that's our job to sniff that out and hold it accountable. But I tell these guys all the time, and I genuinely mean this. Better football players better human beings make better football players. That facts. Why? Because the same things you need to be a great football player, same things you need to be a great human, right? Toughness, resiliency, focus, dedication, Empathy. Oh, empathy is my favorite player. How does empathy make you a better football player? What do you mean? How does empathy make you a better football player? Like if you can empathize with the guy on hard times underneath the bridge over here, and you go grab him a sandwich, you hand him a sandwich, say, hey man, I got to go to class, but like, man, I hope things get better for you, whatever. Like that sucks. I'm just like, you're feeling for that guy, empathize. That's the same mechanism in your mind that makes you feel bad for that guy. It's the same mechanism in your mind for you to understand what your opponent's feeling in a game. He's out of breath. He can't breathe. He got dead legged by the guard on the last play. His left leg's freaking numb. Like bury his ass, bleep that, crush him. Like empathize with his scenario and what he's feeling, experiencing, and use it to destroy him. Like be savage with it. But that's what empathy does to make you a better football player. But you know what? Empathy makes you a better human. So I just focus on making these dudes better human beings first. I don't worry about winning football games. I don't worry about bench press, back squat, power clean. Because if you develop tough, resilient, hardworking humans, they work hard. They work hard and they get stronger. And if you have half a brain for programming, dude, look, there's 100 coaches out there that are probably better at programming football workouts, a specific scientific dosage of a specific modality to get a specific response. Cool. Can you come into this weight room with these dudes from their backgrounds and get them to do it? No. Yeah. I don't care what you think about it. That's why I hire people that are smarter than me to check me, to make sure I'm not just doing what we've always done. Like, come in here and help me get better. All right. And then, like I said, we love these guys. We take care of them. Like the school I just left, man, I freaking love those guys. I miss them every single day, but I'm learning to appreciate the humor, the personalities here. There's a couple of guys on this team that I've become really, really close to. I mean, I've had guys in the office bearing their souls to me, right? And telling me about all their problems and all this stuff. And I'm just like, hey man, we got you. Like you should like come in here, let it out. And then we still got to go get the work. Mm-hmm. Like, tell me your problems. Let me hold on to them for an hour and a half. Let's go get this work. And then, and that's how you create buy-in. Yeah. I mean, I know, I guess you guys would probably came in, like, the thought of programming talk is like, what's your specific progression from unilateral, multi, whatever, how do you train your multifidus and all this other stuff? And I'd like, that's just, I'm not caught up in sets and reps. I mean, yeah, like that's a big part of what we do. But it's like programming workouts and running workouts is 10% of the job. It's the most important 10%, arguably. It's the minimum required 10%, right? But it's like, it's only 10%. The rest of the time is like managing your staff and managing your team. Like we don't have a position group. We got a whole team.
Yeah. Well, the expectation as a director when it comes to you as a leader and then you as a counselor, you don't really know how much of that's going on until you're in that position, and how many people are coming to you and looking for to vent, to insight. I mean, you're the guy that's, especially when you're someone who walks the walk and you're turned on every day and you show up as a motivational speaker, people recognize that and they believe that's who you are. People start knocking your door down to get advice when you have these troubled times and you're dealing with people in that kind of one of those points in their life where there's a lot of stuff going on and they're trying to make sense of it. So it really goes back to, that's why it's so important to work to build good human beings at the end of the day. Because I mean, even at the places that you've been, how many people are going to the NFL and you're seeing more than the average strength coach? Oh. You have an overwhelming amount that are going to have normal jobs, be an average Joe after their career is over. What'd you do for them to get them set up for success after that? And like, that's why those things matter so much. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of those things that you touch on, and like virtually every strength coach I've ever spoken to who's been in the game for more than 5 years is going to in some way say it's really more of a game of mind, especially when you get to that level. I've been told by a strength coach at a very prominent, like I tell you, top 5 school in the country. He's told me, he's like, Coach Lasco, this is this university, and we're going to recruit the top 5, debatably top 3 in the country at the position. So as long as I can just make them available and make sure that they can actually get to the finish line, they're going to be better because they're just genetically freaky. So me pushing them over the top physically and or mentally is not going to benefit anybody. Absolutely. So I think that like being a bartender in our profession is almost a requirement. Yeah. To a certain extent. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and what I always said, and I agree with that to a certain extent, but what I've always said was if you can get to that level and be in that situation, but also push the limits on development, not push the limits.
Yeah,
push the limits on development.
Right.
And don't just be okay with not effing it up. Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't F it up, to me, is like the worst kind of complacency.
Right.
Because at certain places, even places that I've been, like, you could get away with that for a while, right? But like, I genuinely, like, when I tell you, like, I got into this business because I love mentoring and helping. Like, I the thought of going to the NFL, I'll be honest with you, I've told people all the time, like, it's not that I'm curious because, like, that's the top, right?
Right.
But I'm also like, I'm going to lose the one component that I find to be the most fascinating and rewarding part of my job, and that's mentoring young men into through the last phase of their childhood into adulthood. And that's where I really excel. Like, you talk about mindset. Like, mindset is the biggest part of that. That's what I bring to our staff that nobody else does. Like, that's my niche. Like, that's why, like, yeah, I've got these guys on the staff that are way better strength coaches than me. It's like, well, then why are you the head guy? Why don't you make one of those guys the head guy? Well, I mean, I do have a couple of things that I'm really good at, and one of those being mindset, where we really break it all down. Like, I don't want to go into a full-on mindset meeting here, but like, we ask the guys all the time, like what are we asking you to do that you don't understand? And like, what do you mean? Like, you get out, like, ask a high school kid how many times they've been told to go out and be a leader today. And they'll be like, 1,000, right? And they say, okay, what's your coach's definition of leadership? And you get this look right here.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then you ask their coach, what's your definition of leadership? You know what look you get? The same one.
Mm-hmm. It's like, oh yeah.
It's like, how are you going to ask them to do something that you can't even define?
Yeah.
So we've defined leadership for our guys, right? We've defined, like, we're going to make you mentally tough. What is mental toughness? What is mental toughness? I'll ask you guys, what is mental toughness?
Oh gosh.
I have a really far right answer to that because where I trained for years.
Yeah, well, so great. What is
Yeah.
mental toughness?
Mental toughness is continuing to go until you cease to exist.
I love it.
That's pretty much it. From where I come from.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
That's something mentally tough people do.
Mhm.
Okay. And you're 100% right. And especially from the lens that you're viewing it from. Absolutely. It's a prerequisite requirement. But what is mental toughness? And what made, like, you actually hit on one of the words is continuously. All right. So we'll keep going. Chadwick, what is mental toughness? Are you on your Zoom?
We both are. We actually were both talking about that.
Okay.
We were both talking about that. We're like, if we get a huge viewership, someone's going to eventually say something about it. You're the first one to say something about it, which I enjoy. I think a little bit of a scenario is a little bit better for me. There is, it's the willingness of, if I can't swim, or maybe I'm not a good swimmer and you put me in deep water, am I going to drown? Let's say I can see land. Am I going to drown, or I'm going to attempt to swim there and maybe die, but die halfway in between? Mental toughness is a weird one. I go back and forth because I've seen guys who I thought especially as a strength coach, because it's like, can we develop this? Because you've been here, a head strength coach or a head football coach comes to you and says, I need you to make them more mentally tough. It's like, I need you to recruit mentally tough people and we're good. But there is a part of me that has seen people, it's like, did they always have that in them? Or did I pull that out of them or put them in a situation where we actually got better because they believe in themselves?
Yeah.
So I've now come to believe that, I don't know, some people have a mental toughness that is there, but if you don't, or they don't find a way to unlock that and realize that they got more to go through, and they can continue to dig down, it's a not giving up, in its simplest terms for me. When you're faced with adversity, you're faced with anything, if you have no give up, like, I'm going to die before I give up, that's mental toughness. It's just like, what degree and how deep is that for you as a human?
So yeah, and so I love the swimming example. That is what a mentally tough person would do. And again, so I love this question because
great.
I would argue that you two guys have a better, like, if you do what you do right here all the time, like, you have these abstract conversations about topics just like this. But I love this because you're both very knowledgeable and very in tune, but you're struggling to answer a very simple question. You see what I'm saying? And,
yeah.
But okay, imagine an 18 to 22-year-old kid who has never had these conversations before, and you ask them what mental toughness is, they have no
Yeah.
clue.
Yeah.
And they'll give you 100 examples of what mentally tough people do, but they won't define mental toughness. And oftentimes the coaches can't either. All right. Because mental toughness is really, really simple. Okay. It's a simple concept. All right. It's a long definition, but it's a simple concept. Mental toughness is sustaining. I'm gonna say the definition, and we're gonna go back and break it down.
Okay.
Mental toughness is sustaining the highest level of focus, dedication, and performance throughout an entire competitive calendar. Now that's for football players. I specifically, so for you could just say throughout life or throughout whatever.
Yeah.
But it's sustained throughout. So sustain means to continuously do something, all right, without changing. That's what sustain is.
Yep.
And then throughout whatever it is, all right, throughout. But let's talk about the highest, not any level, the highest level of focus. What is focus? Focus is be where your feet are, be present in the moment.
Mhm.
Dedication means whatever that moment is. Whatever that moment, whether you're on a Zoom, all right,
Yeah.
you know, you're on a Zoom talking about strength and conditioning, or if you're in a meeting talking about football, or you're in class, or you're in defensive driving school because you get tickets. I wouldn't know anything about that. Or you're whatever it is, and then performing at your best. Now, to your point, when you said when things seem insurmountable and you give up. Like that's not mental toughness. If things seem insurmountable and you keep going, that's toughness. Yes, that's what tough people do. But that's only part of the equation. If you know you're going to lose and you give up, you're soft. If you know you're going to win and you let your foot off the gas, you're soft. If you have no clue what the outcome is going to be and you let off the gas, you're soft. That is not toughness. Toughness requires the highest level of performance that you're capable of in every single moment, all the time, forever. Can you imagine how challenging that is? That's why it defines toughness. But so you can give me 1,000 examples of what mentally tough people do, but if you give people the definition of toughness, then no matter what the situation is, even if I haven't told you what tough people do in that situation, they can now apply this concept to every situation. So mental toughness, I've dropped in the middle of a deep water and there's land on the horizon. I'm going to perform at my best. I'm going to give everything I have to get to that land before I drown. That's what a tough person would do, right? A million scenarios. It's hot outside.
Sure.
And I've got to keep running, right? Mental toughness is performing at your highest level. And here's how this is huge. If you run to the point where you're overheated and fall out, you're no longer performing at your highest level. Do you see how running until you black out is not mental toughness? Stupidity. If I'm so diminished in capacity because of the heat and dehydration, and I don't say anything, you know what mental toughness is? Going to your strength coach, say, Coach, I'm dizzy. Like something's wrong. Now, softness would be going and saying that so you don't have to run when you're not dizzy. So again,
yeah, you see both for sure.
And from my perspective, you kind of have to treat both the same just because whatever. But if you're teaching guys what true mental toughness is, every scenario they find themselves in, they can apply this conceptual understanding of what toughness is and usually come out on top.
Yeah, I think
part of mental toughness as a coach is if I program a workout that bangs you up so bad that you can't come in and give your best the next day, that's on me. Whatever workout I put in front of you, you should give me everything you got to perform at your highest level the entire time we're doing it. That's what toughness is.
Yeah, I think you hit on one really critical point there that is sustaining that, because you see people at their best some days. In fact, oftentimes the loudmouth in the room is the one that is going to be the first to fold, but they're money for one day out of the week or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, if you aren't sustaining that, if mental toughness isn't the cloth that you're cut from, it's something else. You haven't arrived. I think that's a pretty critical, important, piece to that is, is it enduring? Can you do it all the time? Because if you can't, it's something else.
I tell guys all the time, I would rather you crush the first 30 minutes of this workout and then tap out, and then crush the 32 minutes the next time, and crush 37 minutes the next time, then go hard for 15, back off for 5, go hard for 15, back off for 5, go hard for 15, back. You notice how that 15 never changes.
Well, that's how people play the game sometimes. So we're speaking about football. You can watch it in game film. Oh,
yep.
You smashed that guy. What'd you do the next 3 plays? You took them off.
Exactly.
And that is, you will see that in the weight room and identify it before they get on the field. So if you are keen, you've been in these environments for a long time, you can't from a savvy strength coach, not talking numbers, not talking anything, you will be able to pick all those things out of how they're going to do things on the field. Maybe not technically and tactically, but effort wise, you can hide it. You can't hide it at all.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, that what you brought there, you've got to have someone just go hard for 30, then come back next time 32, then 37, as opposed to like 5 on, 10 off, 10 on, 5 off. That's something, I mean, say what you will. I've worked with a lot of men and women who are at the top of the world, like in competitive CrossFit. And at that level, that's what you're doing. Like you're kind of a freak in your own right. And they'll do the same thing. The same thing. I have to like break them of that habit of, we have this 20-minute giant set to go through. And they'll kind of like, they'll bump for 5 minutes and like coast for 5 minutes and bump for 5 minutes, coast for 5 minutes. And it's getting them nowhere. Yeah. It's where they've always been.
Well, that's, the same thing we do at our practices. Like it's one of the things that me and Coach Cristobal really banged out and like tried to get together and fix is like our first practice in spring ball, our first practice in summer camp. They're not as long. They're short. I want to practice at 100% for as long as we can and then build from there. I don't want to immediately do a 2.5 hour practice at 75%. Cause then you're practicing at getting good at being 75%.
That's it.
And it's cool if like you go 30 minutes as hard as you can. And then you're out for 10 minutes and then you come back and try to finish. If the next time you can make it 32 minutes, like you said, 37, but then you come back and try to finish. Like I would rather that, like you said, and rather that over. And because we tell guys that I'm a mental midget, bro. Like I'll tell you right now, I hated that feeling when you're running gassers and like you're getting like you can't breathe and like you got to run. I hate that feeling. So what I did was I attacked and I got in such good shape when I played college football that I never got to that point again.
Yeah,
I got to the point where no matter what they prescribed, I was going to be able to do it without feeling that way. But if you get to that point and you back off, it never goes away. You always get to that point again, and so like you're committing to a lifetime of 100% of your workouts feeling that way instead of attacking it for as long as it's necessary to make it go away forever.
Right.
I'm a rep skipper up here, man. I want to skip reps every day. It's a battle every day. If I got a set of 10, I get to 9. I'm like, nobody's going to know, but I'm like, dude, I'm going to know.
Yeah.
And then I always end up doing it. And I hate myself for thinking that. I hate myself for doing it. I hate myself for not quitting. I hate myself for thinking about quitting. Mm-hmm. I'm proud of myself for it's like this manic depressive like episode every time like I train and I'm doing something I don't like doing. And like people always think like, oh, you're a strength coach, you're a crazy person, you're whatever. Like, dude, I struggle, man. I struggle. I think that's why I can coach these guys because there's freaky strength coaches out there that just train 24/7 and never get tired. And like power to them, man. I can't do it. Yeah,
I mean, you go back to that what you brought up earlier, where it's not minimum effective dose, it's optimal effective dose. Mm-hmm. And at what point when you and your team are writing things out, do you say, all right, these guys have never done this move before? Where do you start if it's like a weight room move, isolation or compound? Where do you start volume wise? And then how long do you wait before you touch it again?
Well, whenever we introduce novel movements, we always just anticipate soreness. So we try not to introduce things when we can't afford to have soreness. And so we probably overdo most of the time when we introduce new things. Mm-hmm. There's probably a better like dosage that we, not always, but I would say a lot of times, like we introduce stuff when it's not going to be a problem if they're really sore the next day. But like, so we try, like anytime we're in spring ball or anytime we're in camp or like in season, we try not to ever introduce something they've never done. Mm-hmm. And if we introduce something they've done before, we usually have a pretty good idea of where to start, percentage wise, or judge it with your eyes to make sure that we don't cause soreness. I'm not a big percentage guy. There's a lot of coaches that would call it lazy the way we do it or the way I do it. I don't want to put that on my staff, but I don't like managing percentage sheets because, dude, you got a training max that's relevant for 1 week, right? I would rather use the stuff they hit the week before to gauge what they hit the next week. And if you give a guy a percentage sheet and all the numbers are too light, right, then they're not going to get enough work. And if all the numbers are too heavy, they're going to either overdo. Like if you don't do enough weight and you don't get enough work, you don't get better. If you do too much weight and you get crushed by the weight, you don't get, like, we try to teach these guys what's called the gray area. It's that razor's thin line between too heavy and too light, and you're responsible for training it. Mm-hmm. right? Like you gotta, like we'll set the reps based on the attributes or the training stimulus that we want. We'll set the volume and intensity based on the rep scheme, but you've got to train to your, like there's very few times where we have sub-maximal weights where we're not tracking bar speed or something. It's always max effort, whether it's max effort based on as much weight as I can do for this rep or this amount of reps, or it's how much weight can I do in this bar velocity range, or it's how fast can I move this weight.
Yeah.
Right. Like what's the bar velocity I can put on this particular weight? So there is no such thing as not giving max effort when you have a barbell in your hand in our weight room, in my opinion.
I got you.
Again, there's other coaches out there. They're not wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, like, yes, there is some version of using percentages to never need a download, but I would just rather train these dudes to the breaking point without going over it, and then bring them in and do a download week where we either download volume or we download intensity or vice versa or whatever.
Right.
And give them a chance to get their nervous system back, recover, give their body a chance, and like do some body, like some buys and tries, and like get these guys feeling good about themselves. Come back the next week and hammer it again. Like, again, when you're working with the top level, elite level athletes, the top best recruits in the country, year in and year out, like you can get away with a little bit of that. And so it's more of a psychological game than it is a physiological game. If in fact, I do find myself in a position where we are going to have to make some changes to that, I'm happy to. We just hired a sports scientist from the St. Louis Blues. He's got a Stanley Cup under his belt. Like, dude's a freaking stud. Eric Renahan, I mean, absolute stud. Between him and Jeff Eaton, who's my assistant strength and conditioning coordinator, Roddy Prince, Urban Young, and Victor Ishmael, between those guys, we got the smartest dudes out there, like, working on this. And so what we use velocity-based training. Dude, Dr. Brian Mann works at the University of Miami. He literally, where is it? He literally wrote the book. Where's the book? We have the book somewhere. Oh, come on. I thought it was on my desk. He literally wrote the book on velocity-based training. Like, literally wrote and he's in like all the schools that are doing all this VBT stuff. They're reading his book that he wrote, and he's here helping us do that kind of stuff. And so, like, yes, we are going to push the limits on what, like, the most cutting edge scientific prescription of training. But, like, at the end of the day, you got to coach with your eyes, and you're working with novice lifters. I don't care. Right. The best lifter I have is a novice lifter. Yeah. People are like, no. He's been
elite athlete and elite lifter are big separation in the college world. And I don't care what he might be NFL bound, but he is a novice in the weight room.
Exactly. And that's my point. I tell you guys all the time, like, I don't care what you bench press. Okay. Tell me this. All right, Joe Lasco, tell me this. What is the optimal back squat a running back in college needs to have to be the best running back in the country? What's that number?
Oh God, this is
whatever the number is that makes you the best player in the country.
Yeah, and what's that number? I don't know.
There is no. We don't know.
I know it's probably more than they squat right this second. So we're going to get stronger.
Well, it's funny because you bring that up, and I ask almost every strength. I was going to ask you this eventually, but I asked Ryan Davis the same thing. It's like, at what point? Because he was there. I don't know. Maybe you were there at the time. The Trent Richardson.
Yeah.
Like, squat was like 650. It's like Scott Cochran's like, no, we're not going to squat anymore. And I remember at James Madison, we're thinking like, well, that's crazy. And then the years down the road, like I'm like 24, 25, like you're at Westside for a couple of years. Like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because you just don't need it. Yeah, if you're already a freak, then why don't you take that energy, put it towards other things? Because this is just SPP, GPP for what you do in your sport. Again, absolutely. You're a novice lifter. So why do we care about this running back benching 600 pounds?
Everything
when a stiff arm is, you don't even put that much out really if you know what you're doing.
Exactly. Especially if the elbow is locked out. It's not even, it's really more.
It's nothing. It's a plank.
Jacket. Yeah. It's working a plank or a Bosu ball explosive push up and landing with your arms, like this. Like,
right.
The practical application is what we talked about, right? We're training soft tissue to make sure make sure stuff doesn't explode, right? When you make contact. That's all we're doing. We're training joint systems to handle enough intensity that they don't just from the inside out. I don't care what your back squat, bench press, power clean is. I don't care. Look, I got my video of myself bench pressing 500 pounds. You're not impressing me with your bench press. You know why? Because every 500 pound bench I've seen in a football weight room is 300 plus pounds. I weighed 258 when I did that. Like, I don't care what you can bench press. I don't care. You guys aren't impressed that I bench press 500 pounds. That's why I'm not showing you the video right now. Okay. So, like, nobody cares. Nobody cares what you squat. I want to see you break a tackle. Look, Nick Chubb squatted 675. Like, it was insane. Still tore his knee up.
Yeah.
Came back, healed 100%. What does he squat now? Who knows? Who cares?
Okay, still stud.
Yeah. Well, and that's the
you
thing
know,
that I think needs
yeah.
to be pointed out for athletes, because young athletes coming in with grandiose dreams of doing something beyond their college days have this notion that maybe a number on some lift or multiple lifts or in a combine test, which that could maybe be argued a little bit, is going to make their career. If they come in benching 315 and think, if I can get to that number, I can go to the NFL or something like that. Those are ideas in their head. If you can do a good job of recognizing like that is not it, like that's not the answer. You might bench that much and you might be a better football player doing that, or whatever sport you're playing, but that is not likely. You know, we're going to get you a little bit better and continue to do it as it transfers over into being, you know, likely more explosive and faster. But there's a point of diminishing return. A lot of people, if they're working hard, they will reach that. And then it's a matter of, you know, fine tuning those upper end, you know, power and speed qualities that really carry over to.
Well, I had dinner with an assistant GM of one of the NFL teams Wednesday night after our pro day, and one of the things that we were talking about was, I asked him, like, what are you really looking for? Like, what do you really like? Pro day, we all know that it's ridiculous. What are you really looking for? And I'm going to tell you what I told him I thought. I'm not going to share too much of what he said, but
okay.
I said, I feel like pro day, you're basically, it's the first time these athletes don't have a coach on their ass 24/7, 24/7. And they want to see who, without being prodded and poked, went out and trained and was in great shape and actually prepared to do these simple drills that have been happening for 100 years or 70 years or whatever it is. All right. And he didn't disagree with that, but he said there's a couple of metrics that we really look at. So we talked a lot about the 40, and there's a big push right now in strength and conditioning circles right now. Like, why are we still doing a 40-yard dash with a hand time?
Okay? Yeah, exactly.
Like JB Marin was one of the guys, and Ole, the guy that's the 1080 sprint and Dynaspeed or whatever. There's a big debate happening on Twitter right now, and they're absolutely right. But my point to them is, because they have 100 years of data to compare it to, and then it just dawned on me. I'm like, well, why aren't they collecting new data? Not using it, just collecting it. Like, why haven't we for the last 10 years been using laser timing, but just keep relying on the hand timing like we've been doing until we have a large enough data set for it to matter? Like, why is that not happening?
Because there's an 80-year-old scout at Jacksonville that his hand time is what we've based every athlete that's come through for the last 50 years. Yeah. And we got to stay to the standard now.
No, I agree with you. And you can do that. You can stay with that standard. But if you're collecting data in a parallel data with, because what he said was, well, everybody, like, if you do the pressure sensor start and the laser timing gate finish, everyone's times are going to be slower.
Oh yeah.
I said, no, everybody's times are going to be exactly what they were going to be regardless.
That's what they should be. Like, they'll be accurate now.
Measured more accurately, and actually the times will be more comparable to each other's times. Now, you won't be able to compare it to historical data, at least for a while. So I'm like, dude, if 10 years ago they started collecting this data and now they got 10 years of data, they could transfer it over, and they're like, okay, well, running backs. Well, all right, what did Derrick Henry run? Well, Derrick Henry ran a whatever. Well, actually, his actual time was this. Right. So now we can compare his actual time with the actual new data, and you have to rewire your like gut reactions, but like you have actual data to compare it to. But you would need at least 5 or 10 years to see if what guys panned out, so that you have like the top tier guys, what they actually hit, and so that was one of the big conversations that we had. And so that's what I asked. I said, well, why, like, what's more important to you in the 40? Like, because he had said, like, we got a GPS unit on these guys while we're working out sometimes. And we said, like, we actually look at what their speeds are on their GPS unit and like what their practice numbers are, more so than their 40 time even. And they're looking to say, like, if your guy's projected at a 4.5 and you run a 4.4 or 4.35, they're that's okay. Hold on, what's up with this guy? That's cool. Or your guy's supposed to run a 4.5 and you run a 4.7. Like, but give or take 0.9, 0.09, like what? Who cares, right? But then I started asking him, I said, okay, well, you talked about top speed at practice or whatever. Well, let me ask you this: you got two guys that run the exact same 40 time. Player A runs a 4.5. Player B runs a 4.5. But player A hits 22.1 miles per hour and player B hits 21.4. Which guy are you taking? He's like, well, obviously the guy hits the fastest top speed. And I was like, see, I disagree, because player B, I forget what order I put. I usually write this on the board.
You're good. I know where you're going.
The guy that ran the slower top speed but ran the same 40 time, that tells me he has a higher rate of acceleration and maintains his top speed for longer. They have the same average speed. That means this guy spends more time at or near his top speed. How often do you reach top speed in football? And so I only look, all right, data nerds and statistics people. I'm a huge nerd, so don't get offended by that word either. Data nerds and statisticians. I have 1 year's worth of data from one team to base this off of, so it may not hold true everywhere, but this is what we found. O-line and D-line will reach at or near their top speed. I don't remember what the metric for top speed was. I thought it was standard deviations, but I can't remember. So let's say it's 97% of your top speed. At or near, so at above, at 97% or above, at or near your top speed for less than 10 yards in an entire game. All right, hear me out. An entire game. That's 3.5 to 4 hours, depending on if you're on ESPN or CBS, because CBS loves commercials. Okay.
Yeah. So
that means if I'm a big guy and I run a 40-yard dash in 5 seconds, okay, let's say the average first 10 yards is, of the group is 2 seconds, which would be really slow. Y'all bear with me. That means the last 30 yards is an average of 10 yards per second. So 30 yards in 3 seconds, 10 yards per second. That means for 1 second, 10 yards a second, and they say they average 10 yards at or near their top speed an entire game. That's 1 second out of 3.5 to 4 hour game. What the heck does top speed matter?
Yeah.
Now, go ahead.
Can I ask you this?
Go ahead.
I've always been under the understanding, this for as long as I can remember, that a 40 is really sexy. At the end of the day, unless it's a wide receiver running a go route and he's not covered, or punt returner or something of that nature, doesn't matter. We're really just training. And when I work with people, even at Westside or my facility, like, we are worrying about those first 10 yards on the whole. Is that something you try to target a little more, like those first, that 5 to 10 yards, and then let the rest take care of itself? Or are you really concerned with the whole numbers, the whole shebang into a pro day or sending someone to the draft?
I don't worry about pro day because, I told my guys, I'll train you for pro day, but I'm not an expert at combine training. Mm-hmm. So you ought to go get an expert that can help you win the drills, okay, right? Because you're competing against the drills. Now, when I was a college athlete, if the NFL was combine training, I'd be a millionaire right now. I tested through the roof, and I was good at it. I couldn't program it. I crushed 225. I had a great broad, a great vert. If I'd have gone to Indy, I would have been at the top of all of the drill except the 40. I was slow as sin, but the point is, combine testing, it was easy, but I'm not an expert at training guys for that. I'm an expert at training guys who are ready to play football games. But to your answer, I don't focus on the first 10 yards and I don't focus on the whole thing. We're looking for power output. I'm trying to train attributes. If you want to get better at golf, what do you need to do?
Well, if you haven't golfed, you better golf.
You play golf, right?
Yeah.
You want to get better at bench press, what do you do?
You better bench if you're a bench.
Well, yeah, and I know there's you gotta row. Yeah, I know. I'm just
But on the whole, I get it.
Yeah, where do you go first?
Right. If you want to get better at football, you play football. Well, okay. Well, all right. We talk about, it's an acceleration-based sport. That's what we just talked about. Yep. And to accelerate, you need to create a lot of power. Okay. So if you want to get better at power, you go power. What is that? You see what I'm saying? You get better at bench by benching. You get better at golf by golfing. You get better at power by powering. What is power? How do you power?
Yeah.
Okay?
Well,
so to answer that, when it comes to sprinting, we talk about practical application. Yeah, power clean, a split jar, all those are power movements. Now, how do you practically apply it? What we found is your highest force production in a sprint happens from the initial start. That moment you create and break that inertia, that's where the highest force is, and that diminishes over the rest of the sprint. Your power range happens. I don't want to give specific numbers here because somebody will call me out for this.
Oh, someone will say you're wrong. Yeah.
But it lasts for about a second. Okay. And it's somewhere around 10 yards, maybe a little less than 10 yards, give or take. So how do you get better at that power zone if you can only touch it for about a second, in a free sprint? So what we've done is we've gone to heavy resistance sled training where we target our power zones based on our velocity decrement. And Les Spellman, who's a freaking stud out there right now, awesome guy. If you guys aren't following Les Spellman and paying attention to what he's doing with speed work, you're missing out. Les and I have spent a lot of time talking to dude. I mean, great human being. And I've learned a lot from him. Again, surround yourself by people who are smarter than you, and just completely simplifying and like completely ruining everything that he's putting out there is what we're doing. But taking his stuff and making it make sense for us, we're finding that you slow guys down to around 50% of their top speed with a sled. They're running as hard as they can. They're only hitting 50% of their top speed. They call it 50% deck, right? A decrement in top speed. And we found that's about where you're going to generate the most power. And you run, say, 10, 12, 15 yards, you're spending 4 seconds in that power band, right? So now I'm powering for 4 times longer than I could have on a free sprint. So you want to get better at power, go power. And that's one of the ways that we do that. And so it's not necessarily a distance that I'm looking for. It's about maximizing time spent in that power band so that they can train that attribute and then use it other places. The coolest thing about that is the first time we ever did it was the COVID was running rampant and we barely squatted, whatever. We came back like 6 weeks later, we'd spent more time outside on the sleds than we did in the weight room. And they'd do 60, 70, 80 pound jumps in their PRs on back squat. We were like,
from pulling sleds?
Yeah, time out.
I know.
So we're like, we all went to the office and we were like, we looked at it, we checked it again, we looked at it, we checked it again, and we were like, hold up, like, nah, we missed something. Let's go back. And we like looking at the data and like, no, this is what we did anyway. But like back squats are back squats. Now I'm sure the squat police would argue that a lot of squats weren't deep enough and whatever, but I don't care.
Well, if they were the standard that they were before, it doesn't matter. Like whatever the individual player's depth was, if it's better and the depth was the same.
Right. Consistency is what you're looking for there. I mean, the other thing too is this is a non-debatable thing in my opinion. Someone can only squat to the depth, in my opinion, that they should be squatting in depth based on where they're at. Some people, if you tell them to get into the bottom of the squat, we can bleep it. They're going to fuck themselves up. They're not ready to do that. Do we want to get them better to achieve more depth in the long term? Yes. If you tell someone to squat to their calves and like, that's the standard you hold to in a weight room across the board. Like there's some horrendous things transpiring. It's like, they need to squat as good as they can to the depth they're capable of right now. And we'll work to get better at it. And like, I won't budge on that issue.
But does it have to be a back squat though?
No. Oh no, I don't. I mean, a large percentage of my coaching and regardless across the board, I've coached every sport except for hockey, I think now at this point. We were doing way more front squats and single leg stuff, especially based on what their issues were, whether it be rear foot elevator or front foot elevator, whatever it might be that, I felt was needed. We'd break those down even in individualized for the session. But anyhow, no, I don't think it matters.
Yeah. And that's my biggest point is we have a standardized back squat. Like that's kind of how we gauge our lower body strength for the same reason the NFL still uses the 40. And maybe that'll change as head coaches become, next generation head coaches. But we use the back squat, and plus most of our guys like squatting. And if you can't squat to full depth without your pelvis, like I always get argument anterior, posterior rotation, like whatever, your pelvis turns under. Okay. God bless. Like I know the answer, but it's like, it's always the opposite of what I want to say. And then I say the opposite, then I say it right, and whatever. Okay. But the point is, if that pelvis is turning under and you're opening up that lumbar spine to those pressures, so like, it's like, are we training for back squat or like, I've never been to Westside, but like, if that's where I'm going to go if I'm training for back squat, not to the University of Miami weight room. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're just trying to train an attribute of lower body strength. Yeah. So, and most of the time football players play in these power angles. Nobody spins the only position on the football field that actually gets in a deep squat position ever on the field is an O lineman at the beginning of the play when he's in his stance. And it's only one leg because he's in a staggered stance. Yeah. So they actually start there often, but that's the only position, and it's only for a second.
Yeah. Going into your sled work you did for power development during COVID, what was the max distance you had to pull it, and what was the weight on the sled?
Well, it's 20 yards was the furthest we ever pulled, and that was with a 20% decrement in top speed. Okay. But at the 50 and 40% decrement, I think we only went like 10, 15 yards. But the weight is whatever the weight needs to be to get you to your prescribed speed.
Okay. And how are you tracking that?
Again, people way smarter than me put this program together, but
that's fair.
Basically we do what's called load velocity profiling. Okay. Where we have everybody sprint with a free sprint, 25% of their body, or 75% of their body weight, 50% of their body weight, 25% of their body weight. You plot their top speed during those sprints, and you draw a trend line, and it kind of tells you what weight you need to have on the sled to reach that certain speed zone that you're trying to find. And you use that. So like you might have an O lineman running with a tight end or a skill guy running with a linebacker,
right?
Because their weights might be similar to reach. It's kind of individualized, right? And again, I'll be the first to tell you, I had people helping me figure this out because it's mathematically, I can hang in a conversation. Like I took calculus, I took statistics, I did all that stuff. I can hang in the conversation, but to drive that conversation and really, like, I had questions, but they figured out how to answer it. And like, I mean, I know, I don't mean to sound self-deprecating here, but like, I know what my strengths and weaknesses are, and I bring people aboard that can help me answer those questions and solve those problems. So,
right.
There's other people I could get in here if you really want to talk about that.
No, I mean, the only question I was going to have, because I'm not really big on just like straight, like sled sprints. Now, what did you use a chest harness?
Well, it started with a shoulder harness with marches to teach body position to make sure you're getting that full hip extension, because if you don't get the full hip extension, you're bleeding force, right? Like that last little hip extension, like when you fully extend that back, that drive leg back, is really where your peak power is going to come from anyway. And you know what, for a long time, a lot of people haven't been big on heavy sled sprints. It's always been like, if you run slow, you're going to be slow, but like it's a force game. You're playing the horizontal force production game. Like have you ever used a 1080 sprint or a Dynaspeed?
I do the Dynaspeed.
Okay. Have you seen the force velocity profile?
Vaguely once. Yeah. Force
velocity profile. It's like the amount of force that's created, right? And then as it goes up, it peaks, and it comes back down as you sprint. Well, the force and power go hand in hand, right? Force is how much force. Power is how much force over how much distance and how much time.
Yeah,
that's what power is. I don't know specific. I know how that works in the weight room with a barbell. I don't necessarily know exactly how that works on a Dynaspeed, but you have to put your body weight in and do all this other stuff. But like, so the power function is tied to the force function. Well, if force diminishes over the length of the run, then power likely is going to do the same thing. Okay. And so if you look at the unresisted sprinting, it's a very strong peak, a very strong drop, and then a pretty low power line for, the power line is low for the rest of the sprint. We have the mathematical data to show that now. Well, then you watch the heavy resisted sled program and you do it with a Dynaspeed, which I have actually not done, but I have seen data from those who have, and it's a much slower build. It's a much longer, slopier curve. Slopey, a scientific term, I don't know. Slopier curve, and it goes down. Like, so you spend so much more time in this power zone. So like the data shows specifically that heavy sleds work on force and power production more than free sprinting or even light sleds.
Right.
So like you can disagree because some track coach that was 90 years old 20 years ago said heavy sleds will make you slower.
Right.
Or you could follow the science and the data that is showing right now that it makes you more explosive and faster. And we already talked, I'm a football strength coach. I'm not a weightlifting coach. I'm not a rugby coach. I'm not a baseball coach. I'm a football coach. If you're telling me football is an acceleration-based sport, because going back to the GPS data we had the big boys 10 yards in a game, the skill guys 50 yards in a game at or near their top speed. That's 5 seconds if you use the same math as a skill guy. And there's the big guys. If you use skill guy math, it's less than 5 seconds in 3.5 to 4 hours.
Yeah.
So it's an acceleration game, not a top end speed game. So the data shows and the science shows that heavy resisted sleds will make you faster. Well, will make you more powerful.
Right.
And there's no argument that more power will make you run faster. Or if it doesn't help you reach a faster top speed, it's going to help you run a faster 40 time. It's going to help you run a faster average speed over the distance. So the same question we had with the two position guys that ran the same 40 time and different top speeds, right? That was a pretty easy, which guy would you say is faster? Well, in that example, the guy that ran the faster top speed is arguably faster because he's got the same speed, ran a faster speed. But what if the guy who ran the faster top speed ran a slower 40 time? and the guy that ran the faster 40 time had a lower top speed. Which guy is faster? I asked this question on Twitter a couple of months ago, might even been over a year ago, and I got like the best engagement, great conversation. It was awesome. It was awesome.
All I can tell you is if I'm recruiting that guy to run a certain route, maybe this guy's running the in route and this guy's running the seam.
Yeah, it depends on what your team makeup is.
Depends on what I'm doing. I mean, if you're getting to that level, we're playing Oakland A's stats or stuff. It's like, well, I know as a head coach, if you come to me as the strength coach and you say, this guy is much faster acceleration, guess who he's getting matched up with? Guess who this guy, I mean, once we have that kind of data, you can start to do that. But yeah, the guy that has the more, or I guess arguably more acceleration is the faster guy from here to here, but the faster guy is the guy that can hit the top speed. But how does that, I think the conversation becomes, what's more beneficial for me to put on the field? It probably depends on who I'm getting matched up with and what I want that guy to do. Because I mean, to go back what you're saying with the conversation we were just having, position wise, American football is a different sport. I think it's unique in that sense where the energy system requirements alone I'm playing a different sport as a offensive lineman than I am as a defensive back. Like that's a different sport on some levels. And common sense would also lead you to like, what am I doing as a lineman with the sleds? Like I'm tussling inside of a box where one step quicker than another guy is a make or break scenario in my game. So that's why all that stuff's, that's why that's important to be a football strength coach. And it's a totally different conversation and a totally different game to be a NFL combine strength coach for the same position, because you're doing different things. Those are different things, not even close to the same things.
Well, I love this question as a thought experiment because it's not about the answer to the question. It's about the questions that
right. What it brings about. Yeah.
Because you guys made great points, but and I'm not saying the thing you didn't think about, but like the thing that didn't get brought up is, well, how old is one guy versus the other guy? Is one guy at the end of his career, or the beginning of his career? Like, are these two high school recruits?
Sure.
What are their body types? Because you're just you were talking like as a receiver. If these are both receivers and one might run this kind of route, but like what if the guy that ran the slower top speed but the better time is like 20 pounds overweight?
Sure.
Potential to run top speeds, or maybe limitless, right?
Right.
Or maybe it's an older guy. Maybe one of them is an older guy that's pretty much maxed out. And the other guy's a young guy typically what we see is guys that run big top velocities, top speeds, but slower times are usually weak. And that's an easy fix. We got to get them stronger.
There's a conversation to be had there.
Yeah. And there's, it's sometimes the guys that run, you got a guy that runs a lower top speed, but his great acceleration, like, is he overweight? What does running mechanics look like? What does his start look like? Like all of these things, like what does front side mechanics look like at top speed? Because you might have a running back that has great acceleration, has no top end speed mechanics. And you can just do a little bit of like track work. Like, I'm not a track coach. You can do a little bit of track work on their hip flexor, their terminal hip position when they're in the front side mechanics. And all of a sudden their top speed goes up half a mile an hour. But like, I've been on teams where, we play one of the best teams in the country. We got a running back that breaks a 70-yard run. His top speed on that run was 20.4 miles per hour, which is not fast. And he puts 10 yards of separation on one of the fastest safeties and one of the fastest corners in the game. How does that happen? Because his acceleration is ridiculous. Right. He breaks an arm tackle 30 yards down the field because he's running with power at top speed. Like, those are the things that you want to, the attributes that you want to develop more so than just top end speed. I don't spend much time working on top end speed. Usually that's pretty much God-given. There's a little wiggle room, but you're going to be as fast as you're going to be. Let's work on acceleration, power production, and whatever. Oh my gosh, is it really 340?
Yeah. I was about ready to say, like,
I got the reins and you can just go.
I got one more thing. More thing I got to ask. And I do have to bring this up real quick, just because I know there are people who are listening who are big fans of sled work, and coming from Westside, I'm a big fan of sled work as well. I just want to clarify this real quick. So it was with a shoulder harness. You are on a, I would assume, non-paved, like a turf background.
Yeah,
they're not getting yanked. That's my issue with like running with the sled. People getting yanked, and typically a lot of people wear a belt around their waist, and it's yanking against their spine.
Right. So we start with shoulder harnesses to teach body position, but when we go to sprinting, we are using a belt.
Okay.
Right, a belt around, but now we put it on the hip bones, not on
the back.
right? And not, it's on the hip bones.
Okay.
And it's on turf or grass. You can use grass. Whatever surface you do the load velocity profiling must be the surface you train on.
Okay.
I encourage and prefer indoor turf because it's going to be the same every day.
Okay.
Sure.
Yes.
If you're running on concrete, if you don't mind scratching your chains up, chains are a great option too because they don't have that jerky.
Yes.
Also, you can take the flat bottom sleds as opposed to the ones with the ski.
Rails.
Yeah.
Flat bottom sleds do a lot better on concrete, but concrete's not great because concrete has a really high moment of inertia, like initial breaking point, but then once it's moving, the coefficient of friction is stupid lighter. Like the coefficient of friction on a turf is going to be, it's obviously going to be a lot to break it loose, and depending on how much weight's on, the coefficient of friction is an exponential curve. So the heavier the weight, and especially if you're using rails versus a flat bottom sled, I always prefer flat bottom because there's a less drastic difference between a coefficient of friction from when it's stationary to once you get it moving. But you get a much less drastic difference between the two.
Okay. So last thing before you go, if you had worst case 1 day a week in the weight room with your guys, GPSs say they're getting enough conditioning, you don't need to worry about that. What does that 1 day a week in the weight room look like?
Wow.
Worst case, yeah.
That's a hard one.
You see all your groups 1 day.
Well, you got 7 fundamentals. Okay.
Yep.
So we're going to do our power clean progression.
Okay.
Which at a certain point, when you're doing full cleans, is going to also handle the squat because you're catching power cleans deep. We catch power cleans deep. So that's going to handle my loaded hinge, my triple extension, right? Warming up for power cleans is going to be some kind of overhead squat variation, whether it's band or barbell or whatever. And that's going to have, you have to train neck, front and back. Okay. So that, we'll probably come in, we'll do mobility state, 3 or 4 mobility stations, which will include a overhead squat variation to prepare our bodies. We'll do a loaded overhead squat before cleans usually we'll probably do some kind of plank series to prep the core for the power cleans. Then we'll power clean, depending on what that volume is. Because power cleans can take forever if you let them.
Yeah.
Again, we're not going to the Olympics, so
we're not Olympic lifting athletes. Yeah.
We get it a little faster, so we'll get through that. We'll have to do some kind of eccentric hamstring, likely not superset it with power. We often superset our eccentric hamstring work with the first couple of sets of squats, or we do them on our speed days at the when we're done with everything. But so like I said, you got the prep work, which will hit groin, we'll hit the mobility, we'll hit loaded hinge, triple extension, and neck. Neck will probably be in the warm up. Then you've got we'll do some kind of press and pull in some kind of eccentric hamstring. So probably bench press. Bench press is such a high bang for your buck.
Yeah.
You could go a low incline if you can only go once a week. But here's the deal. If we're going once a week, we're training for at least 2 hours. Like we're going to be in there.
Fine.
That's fine. We're saying 1 time a week. Yeah.
But you got to hit all 7 fundamentals. And you're probably going to have to alternate week to week from dynamic and max effort on things, which I don't know. God, I haven't spent any time thinking. You would have to have some kind of dynamic efforts in all the 7 fundamentals and some kind of max effort. And I don't think you'd want to do them on the same day.
Gotcha.
So maybe you have half and half and you alternate between weeks.
Yeah. There's no rules to this question. So
no rules.
Yeah.
All right, Coach Feld. So we've had you on for over an hour and a half. Is there anything you want to plug before we let you get back to crushing it?
Yes. Listen, I don't know what the 45-day challenge is going to look like this year. I have yet to be able to have time to reach out to Special Olympics in the state of Florida. I'm big on the 45-day challenge. It started originally to get coaches involved during camp. Like, you got to go watch film, but come get 100 buys and tries. Do something, get your heart rate up, train every single day, 45 days straight, get big juicy arms. And it turned into a charitable fundraiser for Special Olympics. Okay, I don't know what that's going to look like this year, but I encourage everybody to check in with me somewhere in July when we get close to 45 days before the first game. Participate in the 45-day challenge. Rule number one is the most important one. Put something positive into the world every single day. I encourage you to either buy a shirt or donate, whatever we end up coming up with. Special Olympics across the country needs our help, needs our involvement. Provides a lot of programs for a lot of people who love to train and compete. And I really ask that everybody just, one, be involved, but rule number one, again, is the most important thing. Put something positive in the world every single day. Stop talking trash to people on Twitter about stuff that you have no idea what you're talking about. But in general, just love people and put good vibes out there, man. There's enough negativity and hate in the world.
Awesome. All right, Coach, we'll let you get back to it. Thank you for coming on. We're going to circle back to you down the road so we can continue this conversation, if that's all right with you.
Hey, anytime, man. Like I said, I like chopping shop with good people that know what they're talking about. I enjoyed this, and I'm sorry I got so long-winded. I actually got stuff to do now.